Hey friends, I hope you're having an amazing day. This is a shameless plug going out to my free downloads. I just loaded up cycling snacks. So these are a great way to make your own healthy snacks for training inside, outside, or for the family. So go to askcoachsylvie.com and download them today. All right, welcome back to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling podcast with your host, Sylvie Daou. And I am super excited to have this gentleman, this pro racer on our podcast. Tyler Landine is I saw him on my Instagram and I just put it out there, and he was so generous to give up his time for my podcast to talk about some really well-needed topics of mental health and the athletes. But we're going to talk about athletes, everyday people. But here's a little bit of background on Tyler before we bring him out. So Tyler is a professional cyclist from Phoenix, no longer Phoenix, actually. He is sitting in Arkansas.
Northwest Arkansas, yeah.
Northwest Arkansas. His love for two wheels began at the age of 3 when his dad rolled his first bike into the garage. It's just like most of us. Taylor grew up frequenting the local moto track, so sort of like a love of motorcycles on the weekends. And then in 2005, Taylor entered his first downhill mountain bike race, which led him to the world of competitive racing. So before we get into him, he's turned pro. We're going to get all his background, but his last big race that we are going to touch on was the 2021 Unbound Gravel XL race of 350 miles. I'm doing more podcasts on these long endurance races. I'm like, whoa, amazing. Welcome to the podcast, Taylor.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I appreciate you reaching out. Glad we could sit down and do this.
I'm so glad that, I am glad too, actually. I'm actually a little nervous. I won't lie. Just because I'll tell you, I listened, like I was mentioning before, I listened to your podcast, which is, if you go to his Instagram account, he's got a podcast up there that he just did, I believe, with Derek Teal, Dialed Health. And I had no idea the mental health, I'd say issues, but struggles that you're going through, just listening to that. And also a little bit of fun stuff about your Unbound history and getting your stomach ready. I was like, what? People actually do that?
Yeah.
So I want to shout out Derek and his podcast, Dialed Health, and go listen to his episode there. But so before we get into all that other stuff, I always love to ask, how did you get into cycling? Besides your dad bringing home your bike at the age of 3, how did it get started, really?
For sure. So I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. My dad has always ridden and raced mountains as long as I can remember. When I was younger, I was kind of more into the moto scene. So going to the local motorcycle tracks. And at the time, I didn't have my driver's license. So my dad was taking me to the moto tracks on the weekends. And for the longest time there, he was like, Taylor, you live in and around, in his opinion, and now my opinion, one of the best places to ride mountain bikes in the country. And that was right on South Mountain in Phoenix, Arizona. And he's like, wow, I can't continue taking you to the tracks like every weekend. You can't rely on me. Like, why don't you pick up a bike and it's in your backyard? And I pushed it off for the longest time. And finally one day I went for a ride with him, probably in 2004. And I was instantly hooked. I was like, I can't believe I've pushed this off for so long. Like, literally out our front door, it was probably a 3 to 4 minute ride to be on single track in the desert in Phoenix there. So like, that kind of changed things for me. Had no aspirations of racing at that time or doing anything like that. I just wanted to go out and explore. like after school with my dad, in the evenings, in the mornings, whatever it was. And that quickly led to, obviously, I think most kids when they're younger, they look up to their parents, whether it's their mother or their father, right? And my dad was always racing. He was doing, at the time, 24 hours in Moab on a team.
Right.
That was his big event of the year. And at the time, 24 hours of Moab was huge. So I was always kind of around that scene. I really didn't have much like personal interest in doing it myself, but I was interested. Like I saw him training and I saw all of the logistics being planned, and one thing led to another, and he kind of fell out of that style of racing and started racing downhill. And yeah, it was kind of
wow.
odd, but
yeah,
I followed in his footsteps there because it was a way for my dad and I to spend time together on the weekends and show up to races. And yeah, we did that for a handful of years together and had a blast doing it. And I liked downhill racing, but at the same time, I didn't have that like natural talent that you needed. I still really enjoyed it, but I enjoyed like just being on my bike all day.
Yeah.
Like that's what I loved going to races, because you could race downhill, you could race cross country, there's so many things you could do. And it's like, why limit myself just to one thing? It was probably because I didn't have the talent just to race downhill.
Well, downhill's a bit of a, like, you got to be specific, and that's like just opening it up down the hill, and there's nothing.
Yeah.
And I, like mountain bike racing is fun because you get to see more terrain, you get to change your gears a couple times, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I can see how it'd be like lose its appeal after a while. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And so my downhill bike in Phoenix, we didn't have any chairlifts or anything. And I would ride after school, and I didn't have anybody to shuttle me. So I would pedal my downhill bike up to the top and then down and then back up and down. So I got to really appreciate the time and everything that went into going out and pedaling up and down. So like, I just enjoyed that whole aspect. I also just didn't have the size for downhill racing. I didn't have that like explosive fitness that those guys have.
Isn't it more guts? Like really to be able to not be on your brakes and take the right line.
There's
and
a lot.
Get down as fast as you can. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, but fitness is huge. Like those guys are incredibly fit. Explosive fitness for sure.
Wow.
And I didn't have that. And I still really don't have that type of fitness. Yeah, one thing led to another. I kind of fell out of the downhill racing, had some interest in endurance stuff at that time, and then wasn't very serious into it. Then I kind of transitioned into enduro racing, which was kind of a mix of downhill and cross country.
Right.
Fell out of that. And then in 2014, my wife and I moved to Colorado for a year.
Okay. How'd you meet your wife? Mountain biking?
No, high school ceramics.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yep.
So who was in the ceramics class? Was it like was this one of your electives? You just went in there and you met, or like you just like, hey?
Exactly. Yep. It was just an elective class, and we both happened to be there. And yeah, I was I was a junior. She was a sophomore. And I remember you were either a hand builder or on the wheel in ceramics, and I was horrible at the wheel, so I went to a hand builder, and she did the same thing. And yeah, we've been together ever since.
Oh, that's sweet. So does she share your love for cycling as well? Is she big into the bike scene, like just a supporter?
Yeah, I mean, cycling isn't her passion. She worked for Pivot Cycles for 6 years. She knows the industry really well. She understands racing really well. She obviously knows me really well. I trust anything and everything that she does in terms of the support side at
Oh,
events,
awesome.
especially like the long races that are like 24 hours long. I think that she knows it just as well as anybody else. So yeah, but cycling, no, is not her. It's not her passion. And that's totally okay with me.
Yeah, it's the same with my husband. He does like the trail running, orienteering, and I do the racing and the cycling, and it's great because there's no competition there, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's
we
kind
just
of
support
like
each other and have our different goals, and it's good.
Yep. And it's kind of like you can, when you're doing your thing, when you're done with that, you can put it away, and then it's away for the day. You know what I mean? It's kind of like growing up, none of my friends rode or raced mountain bikes really. So it was just it felt like my thing. And it was special to me because when I went out on my bike, it was my time and my time only.
Yeah. Cool. So now how did you land into being a pro mountain biker?
It's interesting. It's something that when we moved to Colorado in 2014, and that's kind of when 2014, 2015 was like, all right, I really want to figure this out. Like I want, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it to 100%. I want to go all in. And I was dealing with a lot of health issues at the time. Stomach issues in particular. Like I would be down to a pretty low weight regularly. I don't want to be too graphic, but like it wasn't uncommon for me to visit the restroom 10 to 15 times a day for as long as I can remember up until that point. It was pretty bad. I just kind of accepted that. And so racing at the time, the majority of my events went horribly. A lot of them DNFs because of my stomach.
Right. You had to stop.
And around that time I had 2 pretty major operations in my pancreas.
Okay.
And I would spend each of those operations, I would spend a week in the hospital. They finally put a stent in my pancreas.
Wow.
And so it's kind of like I was trying to do this cycling thing and then dealing with these stomach issues. And it was like, I couldn't really figure it out until 2015 hit. And it was like, okay, I'm starting to figure out my stomach. Around that time, I had also figured out a lot of those stomach issues in hindsight now were up in my head. I was dealing with so much depression and anxiety. I think that I honestly created those issues in my stomach.
Can you talk about that? Because I have a daughter, she's 19, and being the mom, you know, and of course being the teenager, a young adult, she knows everything. And I'm just trying to offer up some help. Can you talk to me more about that? Like say, because she's developed a lot of gut issues and it's stemming into her small intestines. And I know that she goes through a lot of anxiety. And if you were trying to explain it more to a parent of who, like me, what would you say? Like knowing now, like what you figured out that your gut issues were created from your anxiety, what would you say? Like, how would you explain it? Because I'm trying to help her. Like, but you know, moms don't know anything, and she's done all the research, and you know, I just like, you know, right now I was just sending her some stuff on meditation. I'm like, maybe, you know, allowing your body to accept, and she's like, this is not going to work. I'm like, anyways, so what would you say? What would you say about that, knowing what you know now?
I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I know for me, had I talked about what was going on in my head at that time, that would have been huge. Like, I didn't realize how impactful it was like how much of a negative impact it had on my health, holding that stuff in.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't feel like it was either A, important to talk about, or B, I didn't want to like burden other people with my problems.
Right.
And yeah, you hold that stuff in long enough, it's going to wreak havoc on your body, both mentally and physically.
I totally agree. Now, can you share some of that stuff and like how far back it started? Like, was this something that you developed as a child? That was it, traumatic incidents? Like, what brought it on? And have you been able to pinpoint where it kind of started?
There was really nothing traumatic that caused it. I remember I remember having issues with anxiety and depression since I was like 8 years old. I remember it centered around a family vacation at that time to California, and coming home from that. And I was only 8 years old, but I knew that something was different. Like something was, I felt like I was wired differently. Like I felt emotions way too strongly to be that age. I didn't know how to deal with those emotions at that age. I didn't know like if I could talk about those emotions to my parents even at that age. And I recall feeling that deep sense of like hopelessness at age 8.
Wow.
And that I knew that was not normal.
Right.
It took a long time, obviously, at that age. I didn't really know what was going on. Then you fast forward until 2009, I think, was a pretty traumatic year for my family and I.
Okay.
That year, my parents got divorced. My mom was diagnosed with cancer for the second time, and then our house burned down on Christmas night. So I think that I held a lot of that stuff in from that year moving forward.
Right.
The house fire was pretty severe in the sense that my mom and I were kind of lucky to get out of there.
Oh, wow.
Before it was too late. So that had a pretty major impact on me. And I think it still does, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine you still think about that. Now, would you talk PTSD when it comes to stuff like that? Have you ever used that term? Because I think PTSD and mental health are probably like one and the same.
Yeah, like I've seen a lot of doctors for this mental health stuff for me personally. And they've put different terms on what has been going on with me. And I don't know, I hate to just like narrow it down to one category or one thing. I know for me, it's there, it's present. So I don't really know exactly what it is. We have put a label on it before. I personally don't like that because it is what it is for me, I guess. That's not to say that other people wouldn't benefit from knowing exactly what's going on, but for me, I just so yeah. It's been 2009 was rough. I think that was I think that if anything was traumatic, I think that was an issue.
How old are you at that time?
Graduating high school.
Oh, okay. So that's a significant time in your life at that age. Now, do you find, Taylor, that a lot of your getting on your bike has been a lifesaver for you between like age 8 and there? Because like I talked to so many people, like bikes have just been saviors for a lot of people. Being able to get out and ride. And
I do. I think that there's been times where it has been unhealthy for me. Because especially when I was like getting into the sport, I will admit that I didn't know how to deal with the issues that were going on in my head. So I naturally would mask that with something. And at the time it was the bike, right? So like I would, whether it was I was getting off school or getting off work, I would go out for a bike ride. And I think that from the surface, it looked like a healthy thing. but I think
Mm.
internally it was probably an unhealthy thing because I wasn't dealing with what was going on, and I wasn't
Right.
facing it head on. And I will admit that I probably wasn't ready to face those things head on. So that's why I would just turn to the bike, right?
Right.
Like I would kind of
Yeah.
forget everything and
Yeah.
I would have my own time.
Yeah.
So it was tough.
Yeah. I find, yeah, it's true. Like we take things and we just sort of hide behind them and just do more of it. Remember, I was saying, so sometimes the bike can be a very therapeutic thing, and then,
Yep.
or any kind of sport, I guess, can then be an over obsessive thing that it just becomes too much, and you just
Yes.
overdo, to the point where, your health starts failing. So talk about more of, getting into your pro status and how, and let's go back to that and how
Okay.
you got into or found yourself there, or somebody discovered you, or you just sort of on the circuit enough, or
Yeah. I mean, being called like a professional cyclist domestically here in the US is an interesting term, right? Like
yes.
it's not one of those things where you see like in the big sports, let's say football, hockey, baseball, basketball, where like, hey, something clicks, I made it.
You're not getting paid. That
Yeah.
There's a bit of a difference there.
Yeah. So I don't know, it was a really difficult, a lot of hard work went into that to meeting that goal. I would say 2015 is when things started to kind of turn for me. And that's when I really started to kind of face these mental issues head on rather than like tiptoeing around them on a daily basis. And once I started to figure that out, things started to roll for me, both physically and mentally. I didn't realize how often I was getting in my own way with my mental issues, both on the bike and in like my daily life. I always felt like I'm kind of ashamed to say this, but growing up outside of high school, like I had a hard time like holding a steady job at first. Like it's not like I would stay places for a couple months and leave, but like 2 years at the time was long for me. And I think a lot of that was in my head. Like I would lose interest of things really quickly and really easily. I would intimidate myself for no reason, kind of feel like I wasn't enough to be at a certain place. I think you just play these weird games in your head. So once I kind of figured those things out, and I'm still figuring them out, that's kind of when my cycling started to follow like an upward trend. There's still a lot to learn, a lot to try and accomplish, and I'll never be able to accomplish what I truly want to. But yeah, and a lot of that for me was centered around one particular event. And that event was it's called 24 Hours in the Old Pueblo. And it's, at the moment, it's probably the biggest 24-hour race in the world. And it's local to Arizona. It's actually coming up here in less than a month now. So that was always kind of the big focus was that event.
So is that when you started that event, when you're 23, I guess you were saying, like that's 2008 you're saying?
Yeah, no. I mean, 2008, I just graduated from high school.
2008.
I did my first 24-hour race ever before graduating high school. My dad and his buddies kind of talked me into it, doing it solo.
Solo, not just in a team. You should do it solo.
Yeah, just as a kid.
Oh my gosh.
And I had no idea what I was getting into. But they
set you up with good lights, at least, because I've done one of those 24 hours, and it was back in 2004.
Yeah.
So you're a little earlier than you, and we didn't have those big LED lights that they do now. Like I had like this little Tika, remember those? I was just trying to make it down. I was in a team of girls, but it was just still
It's probably just like this little beam.
Oh yeah, just little beam. I was trying to make it down on the trail. I'm like, I just want to make it safely.
Yeah, yeah.
But now I'm just like, geez, you could buy anything. It was, oh, gosh,
It's crazy.
how technology has changed over 20 years is unbelievable.
It's
To what
insane.
we had to like MacGyver back then to have like something that looked like you know, an automotive light, like a car light, you know, just so like something bright, like they were
Yep.
hundreds and hundreds of dollars,
And heavy.
and heavy, and you had to carry these batteries and everything. It's just, and you had to
Yep.
charge them. Yeah.
And they probably took forever to charge back then.
I know, like I couldn't afford one, first of all.
Hmm.
But you could rent them at the race. Like I did 24 hours of adrenaline,
Sure,
and
sure.
same deal, like, you know, same concept.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I just remember that. Oh my God. Don't go out on me.
Yeah. I remember my dad with the first 24-hour races that I did, I would always bring like a spare just flashlight.
Yeah.
Because I was using my dad's old lights, and they were good lights, but at the same time, like he had done a lot of events on those lights. So
Hmm.
we were kind of like, I think it'll hold, but bring a little flashlight
for one
just
lap.
in
Yeah.
case. Yeah. So no, it was a fun time to kind of get into the sport, and it just took it was a fun time, but it took a long time to like actually grab it and run with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So after that, did you start looking for other mountain bike events? A little shorter?
I always found that the shorter stuff, I mean, I obviously raced shorter events more throughout the year, because for me, I can't do more than one or two
Okay.
24-hour events in a year.
Oh
And
yeah.
I don't want to do that personally.
Mm-hmm.
But the longer stuff is what I enjoy most. So like 24-hour solo races, or like you touched on Unbound XL, like for
Yeah.
me, that's what excites me the most, is the really long events. And I think it excites me the most because I can go in my head a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And for the longest time, my head scared me. And it still does, like the things that go on up there. But
Yeah.
during those longer races, it kind of allows me to try and problem solve what's good, what's bad, what is not real, what's real. You know what I mean? It's
Uh-huh.
your mind plays a lot of tricks with you. And I enjoy that puzzle now. Sometimes it still gets the best of me, but I understand it more.
Yeah, I can think of some of the times when I'm on long rides. I'm like, I can get myself worked up so good on some certain topics. And I'm like, okay, Sylvie, you got to stop that. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
Do you want to go back to the house with that kind of, you know, feeling, you know,
Yep.
towards like something super tiny that happened that day? You know, you just like blow up in your brain. You're like, oh God, da, da, da. I'm like, I really need to listen to some music to get rid of that, you know, just to, you know, plug into a podcast or something, just to drain
Yes.
out the thoughts. And I know people are like, you know, it's not good to listen to music. I'm like, yeah, sometimes I need to to
Yes.
save myself. You know, it's not like but yeah, I can think of some of those things and you're just like, oh my
Drive
God.
yourself. It feels like you can
Yeah.
drive yourself crazy.
Oh yeah. Like you get mad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get like super mad on your
Yeah, I've had
bike
it. I've had everything.
and then you
Actually,
cry?
yeah. I had 24 hours in the old Pueblo in February of 2020, because they had to unfortunately cancel the event in 2021. The race was going better than I could have ever expected up until about 3 or 4 hours to the finish. And I knew that some things were going on in my head that weren't healthy during the night. Like I
Oh.
was starting to kind of get too focused on, at that time I was trying to break the course record that I had set in 2018 out there. And I had become like overly obsessed with chasing this goal of breaking the course record that I had. And during the night, I was like, okay, I can tell I'm getting too into this. Like I wasn't talking to my pit crew at the time as much as I
Oh.
normally would.
Right.
Normally, like, I'm chatty with Mary when I come through, get a bottle handoff and everything. So that was kind of the first sign I was dealing with something. And then at about hour 20 is when I knew things were really bad. Like, the guy who was in second actually was Josh Tostado was kind of the reason I got into cycling, specifically 24-hour racing, was like, I looked up to him, and I still do. I was convinced that he was like hiding in bushes and was jumping out and then like riding my wheel. It was crazy.
I don't want to laugh at you, but that's crazy.
I mean, it is funny, but it's like so unrealistic. And then there were times where on the course, it felt like I would blink, and then 1 second I'd blink and I'd be to a different part of the course, and I wouldn't really recall on how I got there.
Oh my!
It led to like a full anxiety attack collapse on the course on lap, I think it was 19. Yeah, and so that was, I thought I had things figured out, and sure enough, just as recently as 2020, it was like, nope, things, you still have a lot of work to do. But that's a good example of like why I enjoy these long races. You kind of never know.
Like, yeah, I love them, but oh my gosh.
Yes, like you never know exactly what's going to happen, right? It's a big puzzle.
Right. So instead of watching your lap times, you're too busy focusing on the second guy behind. Well, you should be. How far is he behind me?
Yep.
So does your pit crew now know the signs that they should like hold you in for a little bit longer and chat with you?
For
like
sure.
When you're like giving them weird vibes when you come in?
Yeah, Mary has always known those, but at Old Pueblo that year, it was like I was up on my goal. I was at hour, I think 18, we had a pretty good buffer. So it was kind of like we didn't have the time. We didn't want to waste the time of like holding me back in the pit. And so I've kind of made a promise, like I will speak up if stuff like that is happening again. Because I was in a really bad way out there when I kind of came apart. I knew like when I would get confused in how I got to sections of the course, I'm like, something's going on here. Like I'm in a different world. Like I was totally gone.
That's scary, especially, well, it was during the day now at that time.
At that time, yeah, it was close to the finish. Yeah.
Yeah. It's because I'm just thinking like you could have an accident, you know, just losing focus on the trail. And you have to find you back in the course.
Yeah.
Where is he?
Yep.
So you went and you crushed the 2021 Unbound Gravel XL. We're thinking it's about 500 kilometers. Now, I remember you on your podcast, you were talking about conditioning your stomach. And I'm like, I've never thought about that, because I was sharing with you that I used to do adventure racing, like multi-day, 8, and my last one was 8 days, or it was, it's a 10-day race, but we did it in 8 days. And in all my time that I adventure raced, like 24 hours, 36 hours, 6 days, we never thought about conditioning our stomachs. And can you talk about that? Because I thought it was kind of hilarious, actually. Yeah. The way you would like, but I could, anyway,
it's probably an excuse for me to like eat junk food at a gas station, honestly. Because everybody knows that feeling, like when you stop at the gas station mid-ride and you're like, I'm gonna grab an extra
gummy bears, some beef jerky, salt, sugar pop.
Yep. But for like, I was doing that for Unbound for a couple of months leading into it. Every time I'd go into a gas station, I would make it a point to go in with a purpose, and a purpose of like trying to be as quick as I could going into a gas station just on training rides. So I knew exactly what to look for. And like listening to my cravings. And I found like I would crave some weird stuff, but the one thing I always kept going back to, even regardless of the temperature, was like strawberry milk. Like it could be, it's weird. And I still go for that.
I can't even think of dairy at that point.
So like for me, it was just like it tasted like a milkshake,
Yeah.
you know? But yeah, I would go in there and I would be on a mission to get X amount of calories and make sure that for 6-7 hour rides, I would not fall behind on my calorie count for
Well,
those.
yeah,
Like,
you can't afford to, because then it's just downhill if you let that happen.
yeah, I mean, you're in a
Yeah.
deficit as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But my goal for training was like, don't ever fall behind. I had a
Yeah.
goal of calories I needed to meet per
Yeah.
hour, and I was going to get that. So a lot of my nutrition came from liquid calories in the form of
Yeah.
infinite nutrition. But obviously, I would run out of I'd empty my bottles on training rides.
Yeah.
So I'd go in, like you said, beef jerky, like Heath bars for me are like a go-to, like the toffee. I don't know why.
I don't think we have those here, but I know there's a variety of bars, and mine are the explosive gummy bears with the like little gel inside.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. If I'm on a road trip, those are like beside me.
Yep.
But I can't imagine if I went in there with like the sole purpose of eating everything that I would normally crave, that would be bad for me.
Yeah, there's times like when I would force feed that stuff down, and you definitely leave there with your legs heavy and like your stomach even heavier. But for me, if I just slow rolled out, I knew that I would kind of soak in all of that sugar, use some of the fat, and then it would turn into energy pretty quickly. And sure enough, in training it did. During Unbound, it definitely did, because I didn't fall behind the plan there.
Did you end up sleeping? Because this is my question. I know you did it in 24 hours, so there's probably absolutely no sleep involved. But did you ever lay down for a nap at any one time, like at night, when you kind of felt like you're kind of nodding off? Because I've fallen asleep on my bike before. Like,
yeah. No, I don't. You would assume that like I get really sleepy out there. I just don't. I think it's the excitement of being on the bike.
Yeah.
And specifically for Unbound, we couldn't have outside support. So you were your own support system. So every town you came into, like you had a really big job to do, which was going into the gas station, filling up your water bladders, making sure you left topped off on food and hydration, but then making sure that you left with your bags full of food.
Right.
So like that was always on my mind, even during the night.
Yeah.
Like even 2-3 hours before I'd roll into the next town, it was like, okay, we're going to start this mental checklist now of what I want, what I need. And it's a process, because it's not like you have somebody handing you bottles, right? Like you're unpacking all your trash, you're unpacking all your bags. And it's this checklist that you have to go through when you're fatigued, and it makes it more difficult doing that. But that kept me pretty
that
wired,
kept your
honestly.
head going for a while. Yeah.
And I drank a ton of soda for me was working really, really well during Unbound. Like I drank disgusting.
Do you dilute it with water at least? Oh.
No, I just would go in, and one of the gas station stops, I think I can't remember now, but it was like I think 2 sodas, 2 Red Bulls, strawberry milk, and some other stuff within like 5 minutes, and just it was pretty nasty.
That milk just curdle everything in your stomach. I want to bring that up. I can just can't imagine. But yeah, actually, now that I think about it, when we used to adventure race, we'd go hard for 24 hours. Like if we were doing, a 5-day race, and then and that's to get us as far forward as possible. And then we plan for sleep, like 15 minutes night to like the next 48 hours, 72 hours, a little sleep here and there, like it transitions or whatever on like underneath a tree.
So you guys are running on like true sleep deprivation, because I think that 24 hours, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, like, you're definitely tired at the end, but everybody's experimented with staying up for 24 hours. Like, it's not that big of a deal. If you do it day in, day out, that's when you start to really feel the.
Yeah, that's when and I can't imagine being on the same, like on the bike for that amount of time. Like with adventure racing, at least you get it to transition from bike to hike to paddle. And so there's always something different going on, which makes it interesting. You know, I've never, well, I'll say not that long. I did an 8-hour gravel race.
Oh, sweet.
My first gravel race.
Did you
my
like
first
it?
gravel experience. Well, knowing my adventure race background, I just went in there. I'm like, wow! I was like a kid in a candy store. Like I was having so much fun. Like you had to do laps.
Yep.
For 8 hours. So it's however laps, like it was a 20K loop. And you roll into transition, like fall off your bike, grab some water, grab some food, peel off piece clothing, get back on your bike. Woohoo! Let's go.
Back out of the game,
Yeah, I was by myself. I had a teammate out there, but we weren't riding together. Like at the start, I was just like, I'm going to get as far forward as I can. You can never start slow. Like, I think that's sudden death. If you like meander at the beginning, I'm like, I'll work a little bit harder to get myself way ahead of the whole pack and work on holding it without, like blowing myself up, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
and the excitement always helps too.
Yeah. So, and but that was super fun. And I was like, but that was my first event back from racing in, I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, you want to do this event? What is it? Oh, sure. Sign me up.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. So now I'm kind of like, oh, what can I do next? But, so you went out, you did Unbound, you finished that. Your next event is in a month.
Yeah,
right?
It's coming up quick. And there's been a lot of changes for this year from where I was last year. Really, really exciting. And these opportunities that come up that I'm super, super grateful for. It's the first year that I'm on a team.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I got a phone call from Floyd's of Leadville.
No way.
Yeah, and
awesome.
Will over at Floyd's, him and I have been, since we started talking a couple months ago, become really, really good friends. He is heading up the team. It's really cool. The team consists of Tinker Juarez, Genevieve.
I saw that.
She's from Canada.
Genevieve Janson.
Yeah, so I was going to mispronounce her last name.
That's okay.
Ann Donnelly, and then Victor Cashes. So it's a really cool and exciting team. And the one thing that I appreciate about Will and everybody on the team is we are kind of taking an approach of working alongside an organization called Go for Graham, which is a organization built around shredding the stigma around mental health.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, specifically in sport. So
oh yeah,
this team is obviously going to be super competitive at events, but at the same time, we're not losing sight of what's important off the bike. And the goal is obviously to perform at the highest level for events like the Lifetime Grand Prix, everything like that. But while doing that, like remaining human. And so at events, the pits are going to be a place where people can come, and if they're struggling themselves, like hopefully I'm there, I can share my story, or just be someone that can listen to somebody. And if people aren't comfortable doing that, I totally get it. Like for me, the hardest part was opening up about what was going on in my head. But at least like they'll know, like, hey, we can either reach out to Taylor, we can reach out to Will after the event, we can reach out to anybody on the team, and they can either just listen or direct me in the right path to finding help. And that's where Go for Graham comes in. So yeah, I'm really, really excited and grateful to be joining that team. And we have a lot of support from brands that kind of share the same vision on that side of things. So super, super grateful and excited. And it's looking like a busy.
Yeah. Is that a new organization? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
The
off.
Go for Graham.
Yeah.
So they've been around for a bit. They have been, I should check exactly what year that they were formed, but they're based out of Colorado.
Okay.
Really, really interesting story. If you look it up, I would recommend that everybody go to their website. It's really cool how they're using sport to kind of deal with mental issues, either anxiety or depression. And I've chatted with those guys a couple times over the past year, and they're just really personable. They understand people and they're willing to listen. And so it's not like they've been formed in the past couple months, but we've been fortunate enough that we're kind of coming together with this team thing. And we kind of share the same objective there.
Yeah, let's talk about mental health and like the athlete, because I'm just thinking of a time when I went through something really, well, it was a divorce. So, there's certain events in your life where you just need to, sometimes sport is good and sometimes sport is bad, because it can send you on such a high and then bring you crashing down like you've never felt before. And that's kind of what happened with me. There's a whole month I don't even remember what happened, like and I just started a business, and so let's talk about how sport is good and kind of how people can use it as too much. I know we mentioned it like a little bit back in our discussion, but how we need to control it, because mental health can get away with this. And I remember, I want to say at the time I had a therapist, because I'm going through divorce, and she literally told me, she's like, you cannot do it all, because the impact and the adrenaline of everything that the sport gives you will lead you to, like I was saying, like those great highs, those endorphin highs. And then because you're going through such a traumatic time, it's going to, like, you're just going to have a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
Basically, after the event, once you come off that high, you're just going to like hit the floor like you've never hit the floor before. And she says, you cannot race. You have to choose between racing and your business. You can't do both. Like, you can't function in the same space and try and do both together. You have to pick one of the two for a time, right? Until you've dealt with it, and you can function and successfully participate in an event without it impacting your life so much. But you talk about things like that, and like maybe how you're helping athletes recognize certain things, because ego plays a big role.
For sure.
Let's face it, man. Like,
like
I could do it. I've dealt with that. And, I'm like,
like, you're totally right. How, if you're dealing with something off of the bike, I think a lot of people, I know that I would mask that with stuff on the bike. So going to an event would be this high, right? And then I could forget about this low. But sure enough, like post event, whether it went good or bad, like I would come back down to that low, and typically I would go below it. Right. And then so every time that low would be set lower and lower and lower and lower. So after each event, I would go even lower and lower and lower. And I, for the longest time, would just ignore that. Right. Like, I just thought, okay, I'll chase the next thing. I'll chase the next thing. And that the next thing will make it better. The next thing will make it better. And a lot of my depression, anxiety wasn't centered around the bike at all. Like, it wasn't caused by the bike, but the bike was not being used in a healthy way to make things better.
Right.
That was the big issue, I think. And I think a lot of people, they may say that they're using the bike in a healthy way, but they're probably not. And I'm still guilty of not using it in a healthy way. Whereas I get overly obsessed with things, right? In this one track mind of like, I can't fail. I can't come up short. If I do, my self-worth is attached to that. And then that makes all the other aspects of your unhealthy mental health state even worse. right? Like, so it's really, really difficult. It's this balancing act of like trying to keep it fun, keep it healthy, but also not letting it become too much and taking it too seriously. Because if we do that, it's just, if you're not having fun doing it, there's no sense in doing it at the end of the day.
How do you talk to an athlete about using the bike as a positive tool? Because I cannot tell you how many conversations I've seen in certain groups, like Facebook groups for women, you know, gone through something like, oh, like say a divorce. Oh, going for a divorce. Now I have more time to train. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I'm just like, no. And you just see the pitfall coming. Like whatever it is, like, you know, they just like, oh, this is my okay to go do this instead of dealing with the trauma or dealing with the fact that you have kids, you have to, you know, child support and things like that. It's just like, I just want to scream.
That's like that's like the big question, right? Is like, how do you do it? And I can give an example from my personal side of things where it was kind of the first time that I actually felt like I figured it out. And like I said before, I still have so much to do until I'll never be able to figure this out to balance it, but I can try every time to get better at it. Right. But Unbound XL in 2021 was the first time that I actually felt like I approached something in a really healthy way and was 100% honest with myself mentally on how, regardless of how it went, I'd be happy. And I stayed true to that. And what led to that whole process was a couple months before Unbound, I had a pretty serious accident on my mountain bike. I had a big crash on South Mountain when we were living in Phoenix at the time. I was found by some hikers. I was out cold for, I don't know, not too long, but a little bit of time. I broke my clavicle where I already had an existing plate and screws in there.
Oh my God.
I had an AC joint separation. And then we thought at the time that I had broken my scapula and my femur as well. So this was just a couple months leading into Unbound, right? And luckily the scapula wasn't broken. Luckily the femur wasn't broken. Super grateful that the hikers found me. They took their time out of their day to help me get off the mountain, where Mary met me and took me to the hospital. And I was only probably half a mile from a paved road where I could get access to, but it took us over an hour just to walk out with my bike and everything. So anyways, I was in the hospital that night, got surgery the next morning, and was dealing with a pretty severe concussion for weeks after that. Right. So that didn't help my mental headspace at all. But what I did after that accident leading into Unbound was, hey, I'm still going to show up and participate in race and give it everything that I have at Unbound. But I've been through so much leading up to it. I consider it a win just to be at the start line. Right. So regardless of what happens, my sole goal at that event was to finish. And I think that the cutoff time was like 35 hours. And I've said this before, and I don't know if I fully believed it at other events. Like, if I just finish, I'll be happy. But at Unbound, I was like, if I come in at 34 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds, I truly would have been happy. Right. No, like, and I was 100% honest with myself. And I think that is what allowed me to have such a good time out there and find personal success was I said that and I truly believed it. And I think that's what it comes down to ultimately, is like, you're racing yourself first and foremost. Right. And if you can complete, first of all, if you can reach the finish line, that's win number one. Yeah. Win number two is if you can stay true to your personal goals, right? Like if you set a race plan, like with your background racing, adventure racing, you guys had to have a plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's always good to go in with a plan. It never, the plan is never, it modifies itself many
It does.
times because, you know, like for placing and everything and, you know, accident, you just don't know what happens on the course. Right. So yeah, it's always good to have a plan,
Yep.
whether it comes to fruition, but it's always good to have a plan.
Yeah. And typically if you stick with that plan as best you can,
Mhm.
the result is usually going to be pretty good. And it's going to be good on a personal level, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't complain if you make a plan, you stick to that plan. Like that's a success right there. So Unbound was kind of the first time that I was like, I felt like I went into it with a healthy mindset and
just like
came out of it in a healthy mindset. And another thing too that I made a promise to myself prior to that event was I wasn't going to get too high, I wasn't going to get too low. Right. So
okay.
If I for some reason was dealing with issues out there and I still finished, but it was after the cutoff time, I still would have been excited. So I wouldn't have allowed myself to get too low.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up winning the event, but at the same time, I didn't let myself get too high. Like, great, I won it. But
that's not the biggest victory for that race, right?
Yeah, the biggest victory for me was coming back from that concussion, coming back from that surgery, like looking at all of the things I did leading into it, rather than just the result on paper. Like, yeah, it's exciting and cool to see, but there's so much more that's a victory in that. And I know for me that works. It worked really well. So I plan on taking that approach moving forward a lot more. I would hope that some people can take some things that I said there and maybe modify it to fit them. And maybe they can have a healthier outlook on things in terms of sport in general. Like, be true to yourself and accomplish those goals that you set for yourself, and the things will come after that.
I think having grandiose, I mean, I know some people go in with big goals and it's good to have a goal, but sometimes, you know, just finishing the race is the biggest goal. And whatever happens in between, like at some point you're like, oh, you're doing really well. So now I can focus on something else. Like when I did that 8 hours, I'm just like, okay, you know, I can do 20K lap. Like, you know, I can, and I'm like, you know, I've ridden over 100 kilometers. I can do that. So, and I've done long distances and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to go for 4 laps, 100 kilometers. And then I'm like, okay, feeling good. I have the plan. Like I arrived the day before. I'm all like, one of the things for me about racing is to be not stressed. I hate being stressed. I don't understand people who roll up on the finish start line and just like start. Like to me, I'm just like, so I have to like get there ahead of time. I got there right in the nick of time to be able to drive the course.
That's
in
awesome.
the dark. Anyways, it was in the dark. It was totally different. But
that's awesome.
I was like, and they actually had it closed. I'm like, are you sure I can't like just go drive it and come back? And so they let me on the course to drive, because that's one of my very first, I have to see, well, if I can, is a priority to see the course. So I have an idea of what I'm getting myself into, and I can kind of plan in my head, like, oh, this like long, like hilly, like this, that.
Sure.
And they're like, oh yeah, it's super hilly course. So I was like, and so when I drove it, I'm like, where are the hills they're talking about? Like, I'm thinking like big hills. And there's a couple of steep ones. And I was just like, you know, was that the hill they're talking about? But in any case, you know, so I just went in it and I had I knew what it was about. I came back, I set up my tent, I had something to eat, I slept well. I had like the whole, cause I'm like a planner when it comes to this. I managed I had a master's women's team. So I was like the organizer, like to the hour. I'm like, this is what we're doing.
So like the true logistics.
Yeah. And so, but the thing is that it releases all the stress of like, where's the food? Where's the this? Where's that? Where's the water? Where do I find all this stuff? So it like getting there ahead of time, you know, people will show up like 2 hours beforehand. I'm like, no, that's when I'm like chilling and warming up and like
Yep.
figuring out what I'm gonna wear, you know, like where's my sock, you know, that kind of thing. Like, yeah, I have to be like that in an event. And I don't care. Like I was by myself. My teammate rolled up an hour before start. I'm like, I don't like it. It's just like, where's all my, I'm like, yeah, that ain't
You've already
me.
taken care of it. Yeah.
So I start in a really calm manner and
Yeah.
then I assess as I go. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing better than I thought.
For
I'm just
sure.
going to keep rolling. I'm going to take less time in transition and I'm just going to pump out as many, like if I can get, you know, I had, oh, you'll love this, Taylor. My last lap, I was like, yeah, I'm going to take my last lap. I have 2 hours to do it for 20K. I've
Yep.
been averaging about 45 an hour, you know, an hour about, and they were kind of getting longer. So an hour 15, you know, as you're getting tired.
Sure.
I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take my time the last race. Cause I didn't really realize that they were timing it. Like, it was just like, you know, laps.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to stop at the pit zone and talk to the people.
Yeah.
But then one lady rolled up to me and we're in categories, for women. And so I was talking, I'm like, oh, what category are you? And I'm like, okay, she's not competing with me. And then another girl rolls up. She's like, yeah, I'm in this age category. I'm like, I just put the gas on and left her.
So
I'm
did
like,
you have to go out again?
No, this is my last lap.
Okay.
And so I'm just like, there ain't no way that I'm going to let her pass me. And
Yeah.
then I'm just going to make it it was long. And one girl ended up passing me. I'm like, I can't even go faster if I wanted to. And I could see it was like the Green Mile, this long road to this light. And that was like where the finish was. I'm like, oh, I'm almost there. I can't
Just
even
like
do
clawing to get there.
it. It was, you know, the slow straight, like
Oh yeah.
lead in.
Yep.
Anyways, I'm just
it
like,
feels like it just takes forever.
Yeah. And it was just so funny because I was like, yeah, I'm doing really well. And I'm just going to like take my time. And then I'm like, what? This is timed. And I'm like, what? You're in my category? Forgot. I'm like,
yeah.
No way you're going to pass me. So anyways, but
that
was cool. Like the competitive side that, you know, super kicked in. But anyways.
You're right though. Like showing up stress-free is a big thing too. Like I know for me, what works is I typically pack all of my stuff 2 or 3 days before we depart town, whether it's a flight or drive. Like I just like to have everything packed and then typically a checklist before.
Yeah.
So then like it feels like a weight's off my chest just before we leave. Like I've packed everything. I've usually packed way more than I need, but at least it's done and I can always bring it home. Right.
Yeah. It's like the wheels, the tools.
Yeah.
All my gear. And so I've got it all organized now, but I think that is so important, like to make the time to put that kind of effort into having a stress-free, and then you won't be playing like all the, you know, I didn't eat enough, I didn't do this enough, I didn't sleep enough, you know, it's just that can really weigh in on you.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
wow. So I don't know, do you have any can you tell us more before we leave a little bit more about I did one thing that came to me. So you're used to racing by yourself. Now that you have a team, do you think that that's going to change the way you're used to setting up yourself to race? Because now you have teammates to think about, and that's a changer. Like,
I don't think it's gonna change the way that I race as a whole. So events like 24 Hours in the Old Pueblo, right? I won't have any teammates racing with me there. Right. But the team will have a presence there in the pits. Okay. So Will be there. the atmosphere will be there in the pit so people can come and hang out at the Floyds of Leadville tent. That's an interesting question, is if it will change the way that I race.
Because I guess it depends on the race that the team is attending. Like if
Correct.
you're all going to like a gravel race, like say you're doing Unbound together, like odds are you're not going to be riding as a team. Like it's
Correct.
just to make sure everybody finishes. But I guess there's some that are points races. You're just going for team points. So
yeah, the gravel stuff
now. Yeah.
The gravel stuff is the big series now is the Lifetime Grand Prix. So it's it's a healthy mix of gravel and mountain bike stuff.
Oh, okay.
People, obviously there's some drama here in the States with the team aspect, especially in the gravel scene.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's a lot harder to pull off team tactics on the gravel versus the road. But one thing that I am super grateful for is having a team behind me.
Yeah.
And supporting me both during the race and in the pits, in the days leading up to the event and after. Like I've never been in this position before. I've always done it on my own with Mary. It's been kind of Mary and I as a team. Yeah. So having that support is hugely beneficial. Yeah. Right. Because I feel like I don't just have to burden Mary with either positive things or negative things. Right. Will, the team manager,
she's gonna miss you. Oh my gosh.
Will, the team manager, will be and is so good at coordinating logistics for everybody. Right. Going in with a professional attitude, and of course we want to go as fast as we can and tackle these races in a strategic way, whether it means only one of us is racing at an event or a whole team is. But for me, I think that just the idea of having additional support there is going to be a huge boost, right? I know that there's people in the pit that are there to support me, and I'm there to support them as well. So I think we can all kind of feed off each other. And if someone's struggling before an event, we can be there to help them. Same goes for me. That's going to be really interesting and really new to me. And I'm super excited about that because like I said,
that's good.
Yes.
Good you're excited about that because it's not like a road race team because that's true. Like, so if you're all going to an event, everybody's racing their own race. Right. Yeah.
And the team aspect on the gravel, like I said, is really interesting. Because it is tough to race like a road team on the gravel. It just is. Because there's more opportunity for mechanicals. There's more opportunity for the terrain to get in the way. Jockey for position is different than in a road event, but I think that having a support crew around me in a team atmosphere is going to be huge. Because I thrive off of stuff like that. I thrive off of having a support system, and I've always had a good support system, but just to have something really concrete and professional like this is hugely beneficial. Yeah, it is nice having other people by yourself. I've done races by myself many times, and sometimes it's great because you don't have to deal with other people, but then sometimes it's like you wish you had other people to ride alongside with. But so with that, we have lots of time to watch you excel this summer in Floyd's race team, which is super exciting to share. And so is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners before we bring it to an end? For sure. I think the big thing is if anyone listening is at an event where Floyds of Leadville is, and you see any of us there, come and say hi. Come and sit down. We are supported by Reed's Ginger Ale and Virgil's Root Beer. So come and share one of those with us in the pits. Also, if you are struggling you or anybody you know are struggling with anxiety, depression, anything like that, if you're not comfortable with talking to us there in the pits, feel free to shoot myself or anybody else a message, either on Instagram, whatever it is. You can find me on Instagram, my personal website. I don't use Facebook as much, but I can just be someone that will listen if that's what you need, or if you want to talk about what you're going through, I'll also be there. I think having a support system in the cycling world centered around mental health issues is really important. So I want people to know that I'm here on an individual level, but also Floyd's of Leadville Racing as a team will be there for people too.
That's amazing. That's amazing to know. And I remember you hearing you say that your ear is always there for people to reach out to you on Instagram. So with that, thank you for taking in our episode. And as a listener, we always appreciate you. Don't forget to follow Taylor on Instagram, myself on Instagram, and the podcast, Secrets from the Saddle podcast, on Instagram as well. You can find all of our episodes on YouTube, so you can actually see Taylor. Sometimes that's nice to watch and listen at the same time. With that, have an amazing day, everyone. And thank you again. This has been great. I don't know why I was so stressed, but I'm like, oh my God, this is a great topic to talk about. But thank you.
I appreciate you having me on. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.